requires a little bit longer period of time of preparing those white blood cells in case something can happen. But in this case, these T cells will be produced if the cell had been infected by a virus, and that's different. So the cells needs to be infected by a substance or invader, and as a result, the T cells will be produced. Now, the T cells that will be produced are either macrophages or natural killer cells that in both cases, they are trying to do what we call cell death or apoptosis. This is a time where the immune system step in and try to do as fast as possible, killing that substance out of our system, and make sure that less infected healthy cells will be targeted, because one infected cell can spread and proliferate, and now we are losing the battle. And that's where this is the reason why the T cells get into the table. Now, going back to antibodies, so antibodies are specialized Y-shaped proteins, and they bind like a lock and a key to the body foreign invader receptor, like this way, right? And when that's happening, now the antibody can escort this invader out of the body. So one thing to remember, the B cells will produce antibodies, but it requires time to copy the structure of the receptors, to bind it, and to take it off the body. And it takes weeks and also years to produce memory cells in order for our body or our immunity to respond correctly to any invader, including food particle. And that's the most important thing. So when people are thinking about, how the immune system can support us, these days specifically, we all think about the pandemic or the COVID-19, but I want you to understand that even food particles are activating the immune system equally at the same way. And if you don't balance that and you don't support that well and properly, then in most cases, you are weakening your immune system, and therefore you are in higher risk to deal with the COVID-19. So if I summarize very quickly the principle of the T cells and the B cells, just to remind you, which is representing the second line of defense and the third one line of defense, it requires antigen. When antigen is produced, then the immune system is kind of like differentiated. Do I need to produce antibody by activating the B cells, or do I need to use the T helpers, T1 and T2, and producing macrophages and killer T cells? And the most important thing to remember, these two are working together, and there are a lot of times overlap between the two. So when people are coming to my clinic again, they will come with all these, body symptoms, and I am trying to figure out where are they in the road creating autoimmunity, or in what is the stage of their immunity dealing with all those little invaders that came into the table. And just to remind you again, celiac disease is a chronic immune-mediated that basically affecting the barrier line of our body. And we need to make sure that we understand that in the end of the day, that will carry us to autoimmune disease. And when we are talking about autoimmune disease, there are 3 stages for it. The first one is the silent autoimmunity, where there will be elevated antibodies, but we don't get any symptoms and we don't lose any tissue. So everything looks perfectly fine and we don't have to be worried. This is years prior to where we discover that we have some kind of immunity declining. And this is the reason why people come over to my clinic, and then suddenly they're not just having food reaction, they also have thyroid issue, and they have sleep issue, and they have gut issue, and they get great title like IBS or leaky gut or thyroiditis or whatever. And in the end of the day, it's not it's not the title that they get, it's what's the degree or the severity of their immunity coping with these invaders that are constantly weakening our immune system. So passing the stage one of our autoimmunity process, we are getting into the second stage, which is where we get the reaction. And when we do get the reaction, now we might get some symptoms. So now we run to the bathroom, we might have stomach ache, we get bloated, we might get cold, we may gain weight and we don't understand why, but we still don't have clinical loss of tissue. So just to remind you, when you are in a bleeding situation, when you lost your thyroid capacity, this is years of autoimmunity or years of the immune system trying so hard to bring the balance. So listen to your body prior so you could, save the tissue that might be distracted. And then when we come finally to the autoimmune disease and we get the title, now we basically having the symptoms, and yes, we do have destruction on the tissue level, and we have clinically loss of tissue. And this is the people where the thyroid is already compromised. These are the people that are, they started with leaky gut and now they are facing IBS, or people that they couldn't tolerate one food, but right now they cannot have 4 or 5 or 6 food and they still struggle. They don't understand what really happening to them. And when we're looking at the immune system and food, one of the things that we want to keep in mind is when we are introducing to our body any type of food, the immune system is immediately looking at, kind of like detecting, is this food is okay or this food is not? And we have 2 different responses. We have the acute response and we have the delayed response. The difference between the 2 is that acute response is happening in less than 3 hours from the moment the food had been introduced. The delayed response is happening within 72 hours after the food had been introduced to the system, and different antibodies will be produced in each case. It's not important which antibody is produced, but what I want you to remember that when antibodies are introduced, that means that the innate immunity and the adaptive immunity already had been activated. And this requires understanding or deep understanding that when antibodies are produced, then more chemicals build up and then more flares are in higher potential and therefore higher risk for tissue damage and a potential disease. So if you, number one, avoiding this kind of food that trigger that activation and supporting the immune system accordingly, but you are in better you're in better condition not to lead yourself to a potential disease. Now, when we are talking about body reaction on autoimmune disease, and when we are losing the tolerance, 3 things that are very interesting that is kind of like ignored completely is A, can we react to food proteins only? Can we also react to self-tissue? And what is cross-reactivity? And I want to kind of like dive into it very quickly. What we are knowing from studies is when we are cooking our food, the food structure or the amino acid sequence is changing. And as a result, we could produce antibodies or new antibodies against the new structure of the proteins that had been created. For example, you can see how a hard-boiled egg, 2 minutes hard-boiled looks like as opposed to 10 minutes. And what we know that there will be people that on 2 minutes hard-boiled cooked egg, they don't have response. But when they are using hard-boiled egg that cooked for 10 hours, now they do get response. And these are the studies that are showing that the heat of the food can absolutely create that kind of reaction. And the most important thing, and I have really a lot of people that when they are kind of like going to um, food that had been cooked, they will respond differently. For example, tomato. So when they eat tomato, they don't have any problem, and then they have tomato cooked and they have reaction. And it's not necessarily just the gluten. It could be other foods that can activating those antibody and the innate immunity as to start with, and therefore the adaptive immunity. And now we are in this vicious cycle that creates tissue damage. So another interesting factor here is combined food. So what we do know that if you eat separate or different foods separately, you might not get any reaction. But when you are combining it together, you might get and you respond. So for this example is like, you eat celery, no response. You eat peanut butter, no response. But if you combine them together, now you have response. And this is also very interesting because you have to listen to yourself. And here are the studies, like, for example, in this case, sausages, if those individuals were eating soy separately, raw meat and wheat, each material or each food separately, they didn't have any response. But when they start eating it as in a combined form, like sausage, look what the response look like. And we have others here like a cake. So there will be people that they will not respond to the wheat, they will not respond to the eggs separately and individually, they will not respond to the corn or the milk. But yes, if it's all combined in a piece of a cake, boom, they get that kind of response. And why it's so important, because in real life, we can respond to different combination and mixed ingredients, and it could be creating that vicious cycle that basically depleting us down the road. So listen to your body, definitely look for a personal nutritional program, and make sure that you are not challenging your immune system and activating the innate and the adaptive immunity. Another thing that I want to put here for you, right, is the cross-reactivity. So cross-reactivity is basically dietary proteins that can cross and react with other food proteins due to the fact that the amino acid sequence looks just the same. Like, for example, here you can see that the amino acids in food number A or number 1 is similar to food number 2. And either you are consuming it or not consuming it, because of the structure, because of the amino sequence acid, the immune system will respond equally. And interesting, we have here some example. So if you're, for example, sensitive or allergic to dairy, most likely you are also sensitive to goat milk, and the risk is 92%. That's because of the amino acid sequence. So if you take off the dairy out of your diet and now you take goat milk, you may not get the same body symptom, but the point here is that you may produce antibodies. And if you did produce antibodies, there is no question about that. You activated the innate and the adaptive immunity, and you're in this cascade snowball that in the end of the day, you are challenging your health. Another good example is melon. So if you are sensitive to melon, most likely, and there is 92% chance that you are sensitive to watermelon, banana, and avocado for the same reason. The sequence, the amino acid sequence in those groups of foods are similar, and therefore the immune system will respond the same. And here is another example for walnuts, the same thing. Brazil nuts and cashews will give you the same response. So you have to be aware of it and listen to that. So you may came negative on the test. That could be the case, but then anytime you're eating it, you feel like a light headache, or 3 days after you get itchiness and you don't understand why, or even your weight had been jumped high by 5 pounds and you don't really understand why. Now, when we were talking about gluten, and that's the most important thing, kind of like going into that topic, gluten or wheat have three different peptides. The major one is the gluten, and gluten is breaks down into two peptides. And the one that is more known is the gliadin. And people that are celiac are absolutely sensitive, or they will produce antibodies against alpha gliadin 33 mer. But more important, when we are talking about cross-reactivity, gliadin as a peptide that we as celiac people are sensitive to are getting cross-reactivity with casein, which is a peptide in dairy, and rice protein, which is the protein in rice. So when you are sensitive to gliadin, and if you are celiac, not just that you have to take off your wheat out of your diet, you must as well take off the casein and the rice protein. If you did not do that, you are in the same condition, producing antibodies and losing the tolerance and activating tissue destruction. And that is the reason why people coming over to me with not just one autoimmune disease, but multiple auto diseases that doesn't make sense if they could and if they would take off those substances out of their diet. And there is no such gluten-free rice noodle. Just get that. And it's just the severity of how your immunity is responding to it, and if there are symptoms against those particles. And that's something that I really want you to understand. And here is the studies, and I can give you more information, but we're kind of like short on time. But again, you can come over to my website or contact me offline, and I will be more than happy to share more things. And we also know that not just that we can have cross-reactivity with food and food, we can also have cross-reactive with food and other human tissue. And one of the examples here is to MS as a disease. We know that people that are eating soy, tomato, corn, or spinach, here is the sequence for that. The aquaporin 4 will be produced. This is the antibodies that found or measure when we are dealing with MS. So if you are dealing with MS and you eat soy, corn, spinach, and tomato, there is no other way for your body to recover. And the continuance of this tissue destruction is kept. So kind of like keep that in mind. The same with gluten. And here is an example. You go to a restaurant and the chef or the cooker go and have these gloves on his hand out of hygiene, but these gloves are carry gluten, and you order gluten-free meal, but because of gloves, you get reaction. And that gloves can lead also to antibody responses, and you didn't know that. And you went to the restaurant, you chose right, and still you get respond, and you don't know why. Here is one of the answers. And what we do know that if you cook tuna, or if you have cashew in any food combined, that will make cross-reactivity with those T4 and T3 enzymes, which are basically the active enzymes in thyroid. And so, yes, it is possible to happen, and we need to be aware of it. So if you have issue with thyroid, please do yourself a favor. Do not heat tuna cooked, and definitely don't eat cashew, not because of the food sensitivity, because the cross-reactivity with the human tissue peptide. And that's something that it's very important for us to realize. This is kind of like an example of blood test for food sensitivity. I will skip that for now, but for those of you who are interested to learn a little bit more about that, please contact me directly. And now, why wheat is a problem, and that's what I kind of like want to highlight and how and kind of like tied it into the COVID-19. So right now, we are all eating modern wheat, which is hybridized, and hybridization is basically crossbreeding, and we are crossbreeding two species and creating a third product or a third species. And what's happening with it, it is a new product, therefore it's new antigen, therefore we are responding to it. And what we have to remember, we are not eating native wheat anymore. We are definitely eating processed GMO wheat that is basically activating the innate and adaptive immunity, and therefore higher inflammation, higher molecular mimicry, definitely new peptides that are binding human tissues to other food, as I just explained, and that's why we are in this phenomena. Other thing that we want to pay attention is food coloring. Food coloring will also produce antibodies. Just keep that in mind. So if you have a child that you're celebrating on a gluten-free muffin and they use dye, you didn't serve this child well. Even ourselves as an adult, we have to make sure we understand, because the food color is an invader by itself, and now it will be recognized as an invader, and therefore will be activating the innate and the adaptive immunity and creating that vicious cycle and create that kind of responses. And here is the studies that are showing that. Other food that you want to pay attention is obviously the nightshades and the lecithins. So the nightshades are always the tomato, potato, eggplant, and corn, but we know that also legumes, nuts and seeds, these are specifically one, and grains and fruits, they do have that peptide that called lecithin, and this will be bind to peptide, and they will create that toxicity, and they will create immune response in the intestinal lining, and you have to be aware of it, because for some of us, eating tomato raw, there is no issue, but then when we combine the tomato cooked with meat, now we got to respond. Or even if we are having sunflower oil, which we think it's great, but sunflower oil have much higher doses of lecithin, and you are responding and you don't know why, you have to remember that there are other peptides that can be bind together, and as a result, we will respond to it. Now, the good question here is, can gluten-free diet be protective for COVID-19? So what we do know is, as of yesterday, at least I checked, there is no direct correlation that anyone can point out. There are exactly 4 studies that are showing or taking care of it, or at least looked at that. But what's interesting, and that's why I put this topic for all of us, is that when we are in self-production of antibodies, the body will produce this ACE enzyme in order to regulate the conversion of macrophages. If you remember, macrophages is those key nutrients, key leukocytes, the innate and the adaptive immunity will step in order to kill any infected cells. So, and they are killing bacteria of any kind, and it is zinc-dependent enzyme. This is why we've been said or told these days, use zinc. Now, when we are talking about gluten-free people will have significantly higher ACE activity, because of the inflammation, because of the invader, because of the antibody production. But at the same token, ACE is used as a cell entry by the COVID-19. So keep that in mind. You don't want that ACE activity to be that high. You don't need that much of that specific content, because if you are exposed to it, then most likely the entry to the cell of this COVID-19 is easier. And what those 3 or 4 studies shown is that being on low gluten diet or gluten-free diet reduce these pro-inflammatory cytotoxins, and therefore lowering or decreasing the potential of entering this virus into the cells. So keep that in mind. We as gluten sensitive people or celiac, we have a higher ACE production, which is okay when we're dealing only on, inflammatory responses. But when we have other infected bacteria, challenging us, we want to make sure it's not there. So this is very, very important for us to understand and kind of like realize that. Now, when we are talking about medical nutritional therapy and the role of nutrition, specifically in gluten-free as a celiac people, but also in this pandemic, one thing that I want to say here, please avoid any food that create immune response to you, and each one of us is different. And I'm always sharing that. I'm allergic to olive oil. Are you? I'm not sure about that, but if you are, avoid it, okay? Eat clean, all organic food. Try to have less processed food, less refined. You don't know what's in these processes, pathway, what other peptides are involved there, and how your immune system is responding and related. And as for people that are celiac or having challenges on a gluten-free diet, we always say that we need zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, and acetylcysteine, omega. But look what happened right now when we are talking about COVID-19. What are they saying? Use zinc, use vitamin C, use vitamin D, use N-acetylcysteine, use omega. That's why. And in order for you to renew your immune system, you need to understand, while you are on a very stressful inflammatory cytotoxin storm, vitamin C is declining. So you have to supply that. There is no other way for you to protect yourself and supply the need so your immune system will be able to do the job. The same with vitamin D. Why vitamin D? Because if you don't get enough or vitamin D, then the immune system cannot deal with all these immunity requirements, defeating all those free radical and storm of cytotoxins. And the same with zinc, talking about the ACE. So we're being asked to give you guys some kind of like gift. So just keep in mind that I gather together vitamin C, zinc, and vitamin D as a bundle for you. So just grab it, have it. Just make sure you know what you're doing, and just keep in mind that if you need any clarification about what kind of food you are sensitive beyond celiac and gluten, I can definitely be helpful, and just make sure that in this coming, weeks to come, dealing with the winter, dealing with the COVID-19, just make sure that you do not challenge your immune system beyond the fact that you are already compromised on the immune system due to the fact that your food is already activating that pathway and activating the innate and the adaptive immunity. So I think that's what it is. If anyone has any question, this is where you kind of like shoot it up through the chat. If not, that's okay. Here's my phone number. Here's my email. This is my website. You're more than welcome to contact me, and thank you very much.
Does anybody have anything to add?
I don't know how fast I was running.
Well, there's a lot of information, but I happen to be gluten-free myself, and I had a question for you. You mentioned
Please.
that cooking changes the food enzymes. Is that better to have raw food then?
Well, let's put it this way. All food allergy tests are measuring our responses on raw food, not on cooked food. But what we do know from studies is cooked food change the amino acid sequence, and therefore we can respond. So now it's individual. Listen, so if you're eating, let's say, tomato raw and you don't have a problem, then that's fine. But if you are cooking it and now you get a little bit more gases or, skin rash or itchiness, keep in mind that might be the reason.
And there's a question from NN. If a person
Yes.
doesn't seem to have a gluten sensitivity, are there still pros and cons to giving up gluten?
So these days, I would say absolutely yes, given the small studies that had been done while on COVID-19. It looks like that if you are on a low gluten diet or free gluten diet, you are in less risk to have this ACE enzyme and therefore less risk to shuttle the COVID-19 in higher rate to the cells. That's the conclusion that I came up with, the 3 or 4 studies that had been done, mainly in Italy, by the way. Most of the studies had been done in Italy, and what they did find out that those individuals that did not eat gluten while on COVID-19 did well, much better compared to those who did. So here's the answer. Now, again, if you do give up on gluten, the next question is for you, of course, is how do you supply the nutrients? Because gluten or bread or cookies are a resource of food, right? It gives us calories. So if you don't have calories or enough calories, you might find yourself with a different stressor. So this is, give and take, and you're more than welcome to contact me just to make sure that, you get better answers for that specifically to you.
Cynthia asked if there are any treatments for neuropathy.
So neuropathy, it's yes, the answer is yes. But looking at neuropathy, what is the root cause? Blood sugar regulation and higher inflammation. And the inflammation is the same mechanism. It's measured by the hemoglobin A1C, true, but hemoglobin A1C, the higher it is, and that's why you got the neuropathy, this is a stage where you are already activating the innate, and that's okay if you're not diabetic. That's kind of like you already activated the innate and the adaptive immunity. And you don't have to be diabetic. You can have also high blood sugar. And maybe not for you specifically, but it's definitely there.
Linda lost quite a bit of weight giving up gluten and lectins. Can you suggest a healthy alternative for adding some calories?
So yes, definitely yes. So here's the thing, gluten is a grain, like lecithin is that peptide that I just mentioned. And basically it's cover very large vast of food, right? So I would say depends if what's your belief in higher protein, higher vegetable intake. There are kelp noodle if you don't have any thyroid issue, but these are more kind of like specifics. And one of the things that I just gave a talk 3 weeks ago, and I'm not applying to you, God forbidden, but just keep in mind, and you can check that lecture online on my website, how dramatic weight loss can create autoimmune and God forbidden cancer for the same reason, because a lot of time we are losing weight because we think weight is the problem, but weight is a reflection of inflammatory responses. And when we are pulling off calories for the purpose of losing weight, and we do not supply with proper food to nourish and rebuild tissues that had been destructed anywhere in the body, then we are creating a new stress, and that can be presented anywhere in the body. So I'm glad for you that you lost weight. I'm very happy. And the question here, and I'm writing it also in my book, What is Gluten-Free is Not Enough, is there a really good reason for you to be gluten-free? If the answer is yes, keep it, but then replace it with other beans, other vegetables, and more, of course, proteins that are, fish, and animal-based protein, depends on your belief, and just avoid soy. That's very important. Well, I'm happy for you, Lynn, that that's where you are. And, we should not be hungry. Being hungry is a stressor that we should avoid, that's for sure. And again, when you are saying that you are losing weight, the only question I have, as a clinician is like, you may lose weight because you are under calories, but you at the same time can lose weight because you're not digesting well the food. And if this is the case, then where you are, I don't suggest this is the case for you, God forbidden. I don't know, but that's what's come into my mind. So, people will come and knock at my clinic for many reasons. One is they gain weight and they want to lose the weight. But on the other hand, people that are losing weight and they see that process have not slowed down or stopped, and they having hard time to maintain healthy weight. Again, I'm not referring to you, Lynn, but I'm just saying, just keep in mind that can be the case as well.
What is it like to work with you?
So working with me is like the first step is like making sure that we understand clearly what is the root cause of the presentation people are coming with, whatever, set of work that they have. And as I said at the beginning, this is where people are coming with, I'm just running back the slide, are coming to the clinic with many reasons, like, they don't have energy, they have infection anywhere, they have gut issues like diarrhea, bloating, loose stool, constipation. They do notice that they have food reaction, but they're having hard time to pinpoint, and say, well, I eat wheat and then I don't have response. And then 2 days after I do eat and then I get response. So what's going on with me? Insomnia, hormone imbalances, whatever it is, the first step is making sure that we know what caused that set of symptoms that you came in to my clinic. And when we understand clearly, it's always due to the analysis that I do through a regular CBC that you can bring from your own medical doctor, or you can purchase that through me and you do that test. And one of the things that I'm looking at is absolutely how is your white blood cells count looks like. I really want to know, where are you? Have you already activated the innate immunity, or you are adjusted immunity, or you're just on the barrier, the first line of defense? Where are you? And then what are the resources that we are dealing with? What is your vitamin D level, for example? Why it's low? What else there is not in place that I can bring into the table and use it as a resource? But the first step is obviously analysis. After doing analysis and understanding the order, and we're setting a priority of what goes first. So yes, people want to lose weight, but if they have hormonal imbalances, there will be no way for them to lose weight and maintain it before they are taking care of their hormones. That's what it is. And, you have to put that in order. And that's why people, having hormonal issues, and then they go to the gym, they cut calories, they're losing weight, but then a year after, they regain all the weight back because they didn't address the hormonal imbalances. And hormone imbalances can be high blood sugar, not diabetic, just simple, 125, the hemoglobin A1C is just 5.8, still not diabetic, but the signs are there. So, and this is just one example. It could be thyroid, it could be food allergy, it could be brain challenges, like, suddenly I don't remember well. And, I just kind of like getting moody and I'm getting more anxious. So those are little signs that the body will give us in order to understand how to balance. But every one of us is very specific and very individual. And when we are analyzing the core of the challenges and the foundation working with, we can put a diet and a program, and then we go from there, and bringing, I think, outcome that people are very happy in the end of the day. Yes. So did I meet the time? Sure. Thank you for everyone. Did I meet the time? I don't know.
The room will automatically close on the hour, so you have until the end of the session. Everybody's thanking you. Lynn, who you answered previously, said that she's eating at least as much as she has in the past, and she's eating food when she's not hungry, and she still seems to be losing weight.
Yeah, and I looked at that, and that's what I said before, is, it's not how much we eat, it's how also we digest and observe the food. And sometimes that's the gap. I don't know the story of Lean, but I have enough experience saying that there are enough people that are coming and they still losing weight. And the first thing we need to make sure is understand why. Losing, and again, I'm not saying, and I'm not suggesting this is the case for Lean, of course, but the most important thing is to understand that even if we keep losing weight, like let's say you coming to my clinic and you are 280 pounds and you lost 80 pounds over a year, which is doable, and we want to keep losing another 30 pounds.
So,
we just have to...
And then just schedule a consultation with you.
Thank you.
And then ask if there are broad application strategies that reduce the inflammatory load for every type of autoimmune disease.
Number one, yes. Number one, identify what that trigger for this immune response. And it could be food, and it could be gut bacteria, and it could be all the combination that I just mentioned. The cross-reactivity, the reaction with food, and food with human tissues.
And Carol Wagenath, who I might know from a drum circle back in the day, asked, what are lectins? What are...
These are peptides. These are peptides or proteins that are in this specific food that I just mentioned before. I think it's here. Let me show you that so you can like go over it with me. So can't believe that I ran all of it so fast. Here, is that lectin? Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
No. Here it is. Okay, so these are the lectin foods. Okay, here it is. So in the legume family, we're talking about beans, chickpeas, lentils, peas, and soy. Now, not necessarily everyone that is sensitive to lecithin will respond to all of those lecithins in this legumes group. So here is the studies, and here is who you are, okay? Now, nuts and seeds, again, you could find that in almonds, cashews, sunflower, and sesame seed. And I can share with you that I'm using, because I'm allergic to olive oil, I'm using sunflower oil, but I overdid it. And I got itchiness like crazy 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I couldn't stop itching, and I didn't know what the hell I'm doing. So I tested myself. I have an energy test device just to hear. And what came up was lecithin. And I grabbed my hair and I said, oh my God, it's the sunflower oil that I'm using. Okay. So this is, it could be one of these. And now you take the wheat off and you eat bread with millet. and you got respond, and you didn't break the discharge of this immunity response.
We have 1 minute left, and we have a schedule from NV. Sprouting lectin food solve the problem completely? Lecithin.
So,
You have 1 minute.
So one word is not necessarily to everyone, not necessarily to everyone. No. And the other thing is like sprouting, like dry sprouting, like in quinoa, for example, I find people that are responding to it like crazy. So I never do that. I'd rather take the quinoa, suck it, cook it myself. And I know for myself that I can do quinoa very small amount, but if I will overdo, I will respond. Okay, so yeah, any other question before we close in? Because there is only 1 minute left.
How about your contact information?
Oh yeah, so the contact information, I'm running, here it is. Oh, it's here. Here's the contact information. You can call at more, MOR dash nutrition, the number for life.com. And the phone number is 408-966-4972. And thank you so much for coming and listening and educating yourself. And just be safe outdoor and make sure you're not challenging your immune system beyond the need. Because that's what we need to do right now, and that's where we need to stay tuned and strong and supportive to each other. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Your contact information. Your contact. To be expected. Dr. Mark is a thought leader, social philosopher, public speaker, community leader, and a chiropractor specializing in mind-body wellness. An expert in stress management and family dynamics, he's the creator of The Right Way, a method to help families enjoy more caring and cooperating relationships. His pioneering work earned him the California State Board of Chiropractic Examiners distinction to teach health professionals simple scientific stress reduction techniques. Mark's wisdom draws upon the sciences of personal growth, neuroscience, mindfulness-based stress management, and tribal ancestral family wisdom. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Mark Schlesinger. Is that his name? Oh.
Greetings and welcome to the Galactic Earth Council booth here at the virtual conference of New Living Expo. I am Dr. Celestine Naisha Stark, and I am so excited to share with you the book, The Galactic Earth Council, Reintegration of Earthkin and Starkin, a manual for those who are interested in understanding more.
Oh, I couldn't get it on 111. 111, make a wish. I'm gonna take a break.